Have you ever looked at a modern submarine and wondered what on earth that square structure sticking out of the top of the submarine is? Well, simply put, it's known as a sail or a fairwater superstructure in American parlance, or in British English, a fin. Now, obviously, a submarine has no interest in wind power, but navies like to use old terms for things because, well, traditions. But the simple purpose of a sail is to house the masts of a submarine. These can be periscopes, radars, communications, ESM/ECM antennas, and even the submarine snorkel. These masts are designed to retract down into the sail and in some cases into the hull as well, so they can be flush with the top of the sail to present a hydrodynamically efficient structure. Now, when compared to older World War II submarines, for example, US fleet boat submarines, the sail of a submarine today is not referred to as a conning tower. Now, let me get pedantic here for a minute. So, to quote naval historian Norman Friedman, he specifically defines the conning tower of a submarine as a smaller, separate pressure hull that's attached to the main pressure hull and surrounded by the non-watertight fairwater superstructure, which in itself is often erroneously referred to as a conning tower. So when you look at older World War II submarines, you'll notice there's a large superstructure sticking out of the top of it, which is sometimes called a conning tower, but technically it's not. It's simply the fairwater, or the superstructure. And inside the superstructure is the conning tower itself, which is a separate pressure hull aside from the main pressure hull of the submarine. Now, housed inside the conning tower was essentially the attack center and the captain's battle station when the submarine is in combat. The conning tower itself would house things like the periscopes, since the captain would be up there looking through them. It would house radar scopes, maybe sonar, the torpedo data computer, and things related to attacking for the submarine itself. Now, the Tang-class submarines in the United States Navy were actually the first ones purposefully built, which eliminated the conning tower itself and moved everything that was up there down into the control room itself. So if you look at the interior of the sail of a Tang-class submarine, there's nothing in there. It's just the masts. That being said, they were not the last submarines in the US Navy built with conning towers themselves. The Sailfish-class submarines, that is the Sailfish and the Salmon, and also the one-off submarine, the USS Triton, SSRN 586, commissioned on 10 November 1959 as a radar picket submarine, was the last US Navy submarine built with an actual conning tower inside of it. So all submarines after this one, at least in the US Navy, have sails, not conning towers. Now, in addition to housing the mast, the sail itself on a modern submarine serves some additional purposes as well. It acts as a sort of vertical stabilizer when the submarine is submerged, and when the sail itself is properly reinforced, it can allow the submarine to break through the ice in polar regions. That said, not all submarine sails have this capability. The sail also provides additional freeboard above the water for the bridge, where the boat can be conned from when it's on the surface. And it provides some space for additional force protection when the submarine is transiting on the surface, since it would be very vulnerable at that time. So every so often you'll see photos of people up in the sail standing lookout watch with like a mounted machine gun when a submarine is transiting in and out of port. So that would be used for force protection to deter anything that's coming out the submarine. So a couple people have asked me if I could make a video climbing up the access trunk onto the bridge and showing what's inside the sail of Blueback herself. I thought, yeah, I'll do that. So in the video that's going to follow, I'm going to show you that. There is a link to a blog post I've written on this where I talk more about the history of the transition from a conning tower to a sail on US Navy submarines themselves, and a little bit on sailless submarines as well that might be coming up in the future. But see the link down there. I'm not going to go into it in the video here. So let's go to the video and let's see what's up in the sail of Blueback. All right, here we are in the control room, and I'm standing right in front of the #1 observation periscope. The bridge access trunk is right here behind me, and we're gonna climb up it. I've already opened up the hatch up there, so it should be pretty much just a straight shot up there. It's kind of dirty, that's why I'm putting gloves on, but yeah. People have asked, what's up in the sail, and can I take you up there? Yeah, sure. And you'll just see how cramped and uncomfortable it is. So let's head up. This is the first hatch right here. All right. So that's what we climbed up down there. Now, a couple things to point out. That is the forward end of the sail. So that's the bow up there. You see the submarine's whistle right there. So, let me step over the hatch here. Right up here we have another area which are plated off right now, but those were deadlights, little windows in the forward end of the sail, because this entire area essentially will flood when the submarine goes underwater. There's no hatch up here to keep the water out. So this is the aft end of the sail back here, where all the masts are. And there's one of the periscopes that I was standing right next to. That's it. So over here, I'm not gonna head down there, but you see there's no real way to access that area. There's nothing back there, just a bunch of hydraulic hoists, which raise and lower the masts and things like that. So the only way to get back there is basically through this hatch right here. Now I'm not gonna crawl back there, obviously. You only go back there if you need to operate or work on any of the masts that are back there, any of the wiring or cables or things like that. So that's what it would be. There are two doors here leading to the outboard edge where the sail planes are. So you look on the sides of the sail, you notice there are these doors here, and they lead out to the sail planes on the outside. And again, I'm not gonna open them. I think they're so rusted. You probably need a hammer just to open up these doors, but yeah, that leads to the outboard edge where the sail planes are. You can walk out onto the sails. So, and just to reiterate, you know, to remind you of Rick Nolt's story of climbing up that access trunk to escape the bonefish when she was on fire in 1988. He said that as he was climbing up, he forgot to unclip the regulator from his belt for the EAB, and it got caught. So essentially he's still tethered, and he basically just grabbed one of the lungs of the rudder and pulled really hard and just ripped his belt off, tore his shirt and stuff, and finally just ripped the whole thing off of him so he can escape the submarine. And from what he told me also is that his head, when he did that, impacted one of the rims of this access trunk or something really hard in here, and he concussed himself. He got a concussion, some traumatic brain injury. So yeah, that's what happens. It is not a comfortable space to climb up. You're not going to be going fast up or down this hatch. And to remind you that they tried to get one of the crew members out of, pull him up this hatch or lift him up this hatch, but it couldn't happen. And they got him almost up here and they dropped him, and one guy recalls, he says he still remembers the sound of his body just falling down this trunk here, just crumpling there at the bottom. It was a sickening crunch. So that was a pretty horrific story. Furthermore, also recall Tony Capitano's story, a former barbell sailor, that they had pressurized the midships compartment of the submarine, and basically one sailor climbed up this trunk and was opening up this hatch, and he thought, oh, I'll just crack it open, let some of the air out. No. The hatch blew open, and all the air rushed up this trunk, forced his body up, out through here, and it slammed. Bam! His head went right into that steel I-beam right there. And yeah, that's a bad injury. He was evac to a hospital later on. So that's what happened to him. So yeah, that's a lot of air rushing up through there. It literally blew the hatch open, shot his body all the way up, slammed it right into there. Ouch. So anyway, that's a bit about what this area is right here. Now, crawling up here, we'll reach the bridge. And again, that's aft, and that's forward up there. So let's go up there to the bridge. All right. So here we are on the bridge looking forward. Most of it, as you can see, is dominated by this heat pump. So maintenance will come up here every so often and inspect the heat pump, make sure it's working. I've turned off the AC in the forward end of the submarine, so that's why this is not running. But there would normally be a lot of noise just from this heat pump up here. You wouldn't be able to hear me. So there's a windshield there that can be taken off and stowed if they had to. That's the Willamette River. Markham Bridge up there. There's the OMSI building. So if I put my camera over the side here, that is the starboard side sailplane. in the bow of the submarine. We have some ribbons here painted on the side. And over here is the port side sailplane. And looking back here, we can see the masts. The black thing is the snorkel right there. We've got the two periscopes up there, the silver ones, and these big green ones are the high frequency radio antennas. We've got some other antennas strung here. This is for the amateur radio club that meets here. So now that we've climbed up the bridge access trunk and looked a bit about what's inside there, as previously noted, the sail or fairwater of a submarine is really just a streamlined structure to house the boat's masts and the bridge. Blueback's sail houses the bridge access trunk, masts, and hydraulic tilting mechanism for the fairwater planes. The bridge access trunk and hydraulic tilting mechanisms are contained within a pressure cubicle that extends from the forward edge of the sail back to frame number 26. Now, the ship information book, or sometimes known as the ship suggestion book, because it's not necessarily 100% accurate, specifies that the sail structure is designed to withstand a wave slap of 1,000 psf from any direction and to minimize noise to the maximum practicable extent. So I'm going to throw up some drawings here to kind of illustrate what is actually in the sail in terms of the masts and kind of go through those. Now, the sail itself is made of fairly mild steel and is not really designed to break through the ice like on later submarines. It should also be noted that the sail itself is not a habitable space, because the area above and aft of the pressure cubicle floods when the submarine submerges, and this is to allow the pressure inside the sail to equalize with the ocean and to prevent air bubbles from forming and popping, which could create noise. There are also various circular and oval plates on the side of the sail to allow maintenance access to the masts either when they're extended or retracted. Now, the sail itself can also be accessed from underneath it via the superstructure plating, also known as the turtleback. So the masts themselves have hydrofoil fairings and are raised and lowered by hydraulic hoists. Regarding the internal masts, they are arranged along the center line of the sail. They are powered by the ship's main hydraulic system, and both the masts and hydraulic cylinders penetrated the pressure hull via wells. The hydraulic lifting cylinders are attached to lifting rings that carry the mast between them. Vertical guide tracks allow the raft bearings to slide along them. The masts have deceleration valves in the hoist system actuated by mast striker bars, which throttle hydraulic power flow. This slows the masts as they reach the upper and lower limits of their travel. Overflow lines at the tops of the lifting cylinders allow leaking oil to drain inboard to a leakage tank where it is drained and disposed of. The number 1 periscope is a Type 8, and the number 2 periscope is a Type 2. Each periscope has a 2-cylinder hydraulic lift actuated by manual valves on the periscope stand in the control room. The periscopes penetrate the pressure hull via hull casting seals. The number 1 scope is powered by the ship's vital hydraulic system, and the number 2 scope is powered from the main hydraulic system. The periscope hoisting cylinders are fixed to the sail and supported by the periscope shears. The piston rods are connected to the lifting yoke at the lower ends of the periscope. Deceleration valves are similarly installed on the hydraulic power lines and at the cylinder dash spots to slow the periscopes at the upper and lower limits of their travel. A rubber bumper is also at the bottom of the periscope wells. There is an independently operated hydrofoil fairing on the number 1 periscope to reduce vibration and eliminate the plume, also known as the periscope feather, when the periscope is raised and projecting above the water. A cartridge bearing at the top of the sail is fitted to the fairing to support and guide the periscope as it's raised and lowered. It also maintains the fairing orientation as the periscope is trained around. A masthead light is also mounted on the number 1 periscope fairing. So that's a little bit about the internal masts. The external masts and their hydraulic cylinders are outboard of the center line and are completely contained within the sail itself. These masts are powered by hydraulic fluid from the submarine's external power system. The snorkel mast, although arranged on the center line, is also considered an external mast. These external masts utilize moving piston type hydraulic cylinder hoists, but the snorkel mast is a moving cylinder type. Except for the snorkel, the external masts ride in guide tracks. The snorkel induction and exhaust tubes are supported by a yoke attached to the lower ends of the upper faired tube assembly. The upper tube is telescoping and slides in bearing seals over the fixed lower tube. The yoke hoist cylinder is between the 2 tubes, which is a stationary piston attached to the pressure hull with a gimbal mount. The whip antennas are extended and lowered using a cable pulley. All of the masts are designed to lower into the sail crown when fully retracted. Cylinder dash spots slow the external masts at their upper and lower travel limits. With the exception of the periscopes, indicator lights and mast controls are on a panel in the control room. Now, when you look at the sail currently, the masts that are currently extended are the number one periscope, the forwardmost one. Normally it would be the observation scope. It would actually be the larger of the two, but this is not the original Type 8 observation scope. In fact, these are actually both attack periscopes, because when the boat was donated to the museum and converted into an exhibit, both periscopes had actually been removed, so the veterans group that was putting the submarine together as a museum ship had to scrounge up two attack periscopes, and which are currently installed today. So the original observation periscope, from my understanding, was removed for some reason because I believe it had classified ECM intercept equipment on it. Just behind the observation periscope is the number 2 attack scope. This is the one that would be physically smaller in profile, probably looking very similar to what it looks like currently, in order to make it harder to detect. This would also have an ultra-high frequency and IFF antenna operating in the 200 to 500 megahertz frequency range. But again, as I said, this is not the original attack scope. Now, there are two particularly long kind of cylinder green antennas right in the center. These are the BRA-11 and BRA-19. The BRA-11 is a helical antenna, and the BRA-19 is a telescoping whip antenna. These are high-frequency transmitters operating in the 2 to 32 megahertz frequency range, and both are capable of receiving in the low, medium, and high-frequency ranges. Between the two BRA antennas is this kind of snowman-looking antenna known as the Bird 6. This is the Bird 6 Bravo. It is a radio direction finder and electronic countermeasures mast, and it can be used for navigation and radio surveillance. A little bit further back is a sort of lemon, or football as we call it, looking antenna, which is the AT317 Echo antenna. This is a very low frequency loop antenna capable of receiving signals up to around 90 feet underwater. And then finally back we have the snorkel mast. The very top of the snorkel is the air induction. There is a valve at the very top which will actually close in the event that a wave rushes over the top of the snorkel to prevent the submarine engine room from flooding. And about halfway down is the snorkel exhaust just underneath that metal plate. And that plate is actually known as the bat wings. There is also an AT497 UHF whip antenna at the top of the snorkel itself. Now, there are two more masts that are in the sail that are currently not raised. These would actually be the BPS-12 surface search and navigation radar antenna, which is next to the Bird 6 antenna. And the other one would be the BLR ECM or ESM mast for radio interception and direction finding and things like that. This would be between the 317 Echo and BRA-19 antennas. This mast is actually distinct from the Bird 6 antenna. Now, from my understanding, the reason these two masts are no longer extended is that at some point in Blueback's last dry docking in 1998, these masts lost hydraulic pressure and therefore they're still inside the sail. They're simply retracted. But in the event, probably sometime in the far-flung future, that Blueback goes back into dry dock, one of the things I would like them to do is actually extend these masts again. So luckily I found a couple of pictures out here that do show these things still extended, and it's kind of cool. I really wish they were still up there because it really completes it. I'm going to end off this episode by telling two more stories about Blueback's sail. As mentioned, the sail interior is not habitable, and inside it is just filled with masts, hydraulic cylinders, and other machinery, and it's not exactly a safe place to be, even when the submarine is on the surface. Now, two stories that we've digged up from Blueback's deck logs illustrate this. So the first story is from Wednesday, 18 February 1970. Blueback was surfaced at the time when around 1920, Quartermaster 3rd Class Verdell M. Myers was working on adjusting the Magnuson compass in the sail, and his right foot got inadvertently caught in the hydraulic ram for the sail planes. The movement of the ram caused a quote-unquote traumatic amputation of his right toes. Ouch. The corpsman administered emergency medical treatment, and around 20:05, a Coast Guard helicopter arrived to medevac Myers from the submarine to Tripler Army General Hospital for further treatment. The helo transfer was completed around 2024, and Blueback then continued on her way. Now, why exactly the sailplane's hydraulic ram was moving when the submarine was surfaced is unknown. Whether it was intentional or accidental is also unknown, because they should have told the helmsman not to move the sailplanes or locked that particular function of his control yoke, especially when someone was working up in that space. Additionally, what kind of emergency treatment the corpsman administered to Myers is unknown, but The lore amongst the tour guides says that it was the partial amputation of what was left of his right toes. I mean, he could have very well simply bandaged his foot up or something. Now, for a while, I mistakenly believed that this foot amputation was the result of an officer or a sailor getting their foot caught in the periscope well as the periscope itself retracted down into its well. But, of course, the deck log shows that this is not what happened. In any case, Verdell Mowers ended that day 5 toes shorter on his right foot. Now, the second story takes place in berth 2 of the U.S. Naval Repair Facility in Yokosuka, Japan on Thursday, 11 June 1970. Around 0910, a Japanese civilian worker with Shop 72, Mr. Kamoi Masakichi, was working on the ECM mast in the sail when he was fatally injured. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and his remains were removed at around 10:53 and transferred to Yokosuka Naval Hospital. The exact cause of Kamoi's death as he was working on the ECM mast is unknown because the log doesn't specify. But hearsay from former Blueback crew members we met said that he was crushed when the mast was inadvertently lowered for some reason. But for all we know, he could have been electrocuted or something by the mast. But again, it's not known. So suffice it to say that 1970 was not a good year to be working inside Blueback's sail, because one person was killed and another person was badly injured inside the sail. Anyway, that's a little bit about Blueback's sail, and people wanted to see kind of what's inside it. It's a little bit underwhelming, not terribly all that interesting, but hopefully nowadays you know what is actually inside a submarine sail. It's just a bridge cockpit and a bunch of masts and periscopes and things like that. Now, if you're more interested in the submarine use of sails, as well as the transition from a World War II submarine's conning tower into a modern day sail, you can check out the link for the blog post that I've written on this further in the description. There you have it. There's a bit about a submarine sail. So hope you enjoyed, everyone, and I'll see you next time.